and having great stamina, and he might get a little fatigued towards the end of the year, and I just think that's going to be the biggest question for their rotation is Aroldis Chapman.
Okay, I agree completely. You never know with 100-mile-an-hour throws how long they can go.
Yeah.
That's why you see a lot of players have that Tommy John surgery or the rotator cuff.
Yeah.
It may end some careers. I mean, great pitcher Brandon Webb ended his career, made him go completely downhill.
Yeah.
So you just never know. Moving on to number 3, my number 3 team, the Atlanta Braves. I look at the Atlanta Braves and I just have to say that, I mean, losing Chipper Jones, big loss. I mean, he was there for 20-plus years, I believe. 22, I think, is the correct number. They have a void to fill at the third base spot, like you said, maybe Martin Prado.
And that veteran leadership that he just brought to the field every day.
He was an old-school guy, and with old-school guys, they just care about winning. It's about hard work, getting it done. But I think that with Jason Hayward, Freddie Freeman, and Dan Uggla in the middle of that lineup, Dan Uggla, yeah, he's not going to hit for average, but he has the power that will supply any home runs, doubles, every now and then. Big loss for them. Brian McCann might not be ready for the start of the season, but I think when all is said and done, it's going to be them and the Nationals trying to fight out for that NL East, and one of them is going to make the wild card, and they can both go deep in the postseason. So that's why I have the Braves slotted at number 3.
Oh, but what do you think about that pitching staff? You got Tim Hudson at number 1, and then you got Chris Medlin maybe at number 2, Mike Minor at 3. What do you think the back end of the rotation is going to be?
Well, they traded for Paul Maholm last year from the Cubs. He had a great season. Well, maybe not great. He had a decent season pitching for him. He's a lefty that could come in there and shut some people down. You know, great 4-starter. You also got to remember, Brandon Beachy. He went down last year with a Tommy John surgery. Of course, that's going to maybe hinder his performance a little bit coming back at the beginning, but he was pitching amazing for them. He had the lowest ERA going through the first few games of the season.
It was below 2.
It was
for a lot of weeks there.
I believe a 1.92 going for maybe 20-game stretch where, of course, he only pitches once every 5 days, but, you know, great ERA. So if he can come back and throw like he did before he went down, you got to think that rotation will be solidified and will have a good 4 that they could maybe interchange 5 with some young guys like Delgado or Thierry.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good rotation and a great lineup to fight for the NL East.
They'll be fighting, all right.
Maybe we'll see some bad blood like we did last year between those teams.
With the grittiness of Bryce Harper, you never know. He might go up and sock some guys. You never know.
All right, on my number 3, I have the Toronto Blue Jays. You would never have thought this going into the offseason that the Toronto Blue Jays would be one of the best teams probably heading into the 2013 campaign. You know, with the Toronto Blue Jays, they already had Colby Rasmus, Jose Bautista, and Edwin Encarnacion in that middle of the lineup. And with Brett Lawrie coming up past a couple seasons, he's going to be an all-star this year. You got to believe that. He's a great hitter, great on-base guy. He can steal bases, and he can hit for some power. And with the addition of Jose Reyes at the top of the lineup, he's going to get on base for the middle of those guys like Edwin Encarnacion and Bautista. And even though Melky Cabrera, he had the steroids and he had the testosterone he tested for, I think the addition of him, he's going to come back and still be that 300 hitter that he's always been and consistently.
I agree. Now, the question with the Blue Jays would have to be, they have so much starting pitching. Do you believe that they'll be able to figure out a solid 5-guy lineup without hindering their bullpen as well, keeping some of those guys on the staff?
Well, I think right now the rotation should be R.A. Dickey and the addition of Josh Johnson and Mark Burley. Those are going to be your 3 guys that are going to be the heart of that rotation and that pitching staff, because you got to think that R.A. Dickey's going to get 200 innings. If Josh Johnson can finally just stay healthy for a full season, he's going to hit that 200-inning mark and have a pretty decent ERA. And with Mark Burley, he's going to always be that consistent 3rd starter. And when he was with the White Sox, he had a perfect game. So I just think that those 3 guys are going to be great rotation guys, and Brendan Morrow and Ricky Romero, those are going to probably fill out the rotation. But those young guys, I think that they can probably make a name for themselves if there's an injury to like Josh Johnson. If he gets injured again, maybe one of those young guys can step in and fill that rotation void.
Yeah, yeah. You also got to think their bullpen solid with Sergio Santos and
Santos and Casey Jansen.
Casey Jansen. They're gonna have a good bullpen. So going deep into the playoffs, you never know. It could be the first time you see them come out of the AL East.
Yeah, and with Darren Oliver, that left-handed specialist, he's been around for like 6 or 7 decades, it seems.
Been around the block.
Yeah. So he's always been one of those left-handed specialists to get those lefties out, like Curtis Granderson or David Ortiz, you know, in that AL East. So I think the Blue Jays will probably compete for the AL East this year, and probably come September they might be in first.
We'll just have to wait and see, won't we? Long 162 game season.
Yeah,
that's all you got to say.
It's a long season.
Okay, and moving on to number 2, we're getting close here.
Getting close to the number 1.
For my number 2, the Washington Nationals.
Nationals, there you go.
You got to think they're young with a lot of veterans around them. You got to think their pitching staff. Losing Edwin Jackson, yeah, you could say that's a minor hit, but you got to think Steven Strasburg,
Jordan Zimmerman,
Gio Gonzalez. They're all going to come back and pitch great.
Yeah.
The one question for the Nationals would probably have to be waiting to sign Adam LaRoche. You got to think about, they're not willing to give him a long-term deal, but if they don't, then you got Michael Morse there. There's rumors that if they do sign Adam LaRoche, that Michael Morse is going to get moved. He had a great season coming off of injury last year, Michael Morse did, and he hit pretty well, but so did Adam LaRoche. So you got to think with that up in there, you never know what's going to happen. But overall, you got a great outfield with Bryce Harper, Denard Span, Jason Worth. Jason Worth, if he goes back to his days with the Phillies, if you look at how well he played, you never know. He could come back and be that player that they actually paid for back when they signed him. So you never know. Yeah,
and with the addition of Denard Span out in center, you can control the outfield very nicely with Bryce Harper. I do you think he's going to be the great leadoff man and the great base stealer that he's always come to be?
Well, you got to look at Denard Span as being specifically for that spot. If you look at most leadoff hitters throughout time, what you're looking for, speed, contact. He's got both of those. And you got to figure with him getting on base, maybe they bat Bryce Harper second, then they put Ryan Zimmerman third, put Michael Morse fourth. You got people that'll get on base. Bryce Harper can steal bases too. He's got some speed with him.
He does.
So you get those two guys on base, you got 2 runs right there, and you never know. With that lineup and their pitching staff, you got to figure they'll definitely be in the hunt. And I'm predicting them to win the NL East, come out and go through the playoffs. And you never know. They might make it throughout the playoffs this year instead of sputtering out in the first round.
Yeah. I also have the Washington Nationals at number 2. Just for those same reasons that we were just talking about, that pitching staff and that outfield, and just the lineup with Ian Desmond, Ryan Zimmerman, and Danny Espinosa. They can all hit for power, and a lot of them can also hit for average. And with on base and all those guys in the middle of the lineup, I just think that they're going to be very productive, and I'm thinking they're going to win the NL East this year. And the bullpen, you got to look at the bullpen. You got Tyler Clippard. He's always been a proven shutdown guy in the 8th or 9th inning. And Drew Storen, they're probably going to split the closer role this year between Clippard and Drew Storen there. And I just think those 2 guys with that bullpen is just going to lock down every game in the 8th or 9th inning. If they have the lead going into the late innings, I believe the Washington Nationals will win that game.
Well, you got to think with those 2 guys, and then splitting saves might not be a bad idea. You rest one for some game, rest one for another. Going deep into the season, they might be stronger than most closers will be because closers get used, as you know. There's not a lot of blowouts anymore with the whole steroid era over, and it's a lot more close games, and closers are getting rather important again.
Yeah.
So we'll see if they're atop the NL East next season.
It's going to be a fight for the NL East with the Atlanta Braves and the Washington Nationals.